This is CNN.
Live from the world's financial capital, New York City, this is Moneyline with Lou Dobbs.
Good evening. Consumers caught in the credit crunch. The Federal Reserve Board today reported consumer borrowing declined, down by $1.5 billion in September. That's the fifth straight monthly decline. Consumer credit is now down $8 billion over the past year. Consumers obviously don't want to carry debt through this recession. They're reluctant to buy on credit. And one reason, stubbornly high consumer interest rates. Steve Young reports from New York.
Borrowing money for home sweet home is the best deal. Borrowing for nearly anything else is a pot of gold for the banks. With the discount rate, what banks pay for money, now at 4.5%, banks are charging about 4 percentage points more for mortgages, 6 percentage points higher for auto loans, 12.5 percentage points more for a typical $3,000 unsecured 2-year loan. And for revolving credit, hold on to your seatbelt as well as your credit card, 14.25 points above what banks pay to borrow.
The refusal of the banks to pass on interest rate savings to consumer borrowers is retarding economic recovery. There is not going to be that additional stimulus the Federal Reserve is trying to provide the economy to get us out of recession.
Mortgages not only offer consumers the best interest rates, those rates are consistent across state lines. But other consumer interest rates trace a crazy geographic quilt.
The Motor City, Detroit, has the best average 4-year auto loans, 10%. In New York, the worst, 12.65%. Houston and Philadelphia are the best towns to flash that plastic. Bank credit card rates average 18.15%. In San Francisco, bank credit cards are at gold rush levels, nearly 19.75%. The consumer response, borrowing is down $5 billion from last year. Some banks are responding with lower interest rates. A Bank One Wisconsin branch is now offering a 13.9% credit card. Analysts say more banks are likely to follow as consumers express their feelings by not borrowing at the higher rates. Steve Young, CNN Business News, New York.
New rules aimed at easing the credit crunch, those rules directing bank examiners to be more charitable about the way banks keep their books. The guidelines suggesting real estate loans should not be valued only at current market price. Examiners must now consider the long-term property value and the borrower's ability to repay. Well, the public loaned the government $38 billion this week in the Treasury's quarterly refunding. $12 billion of 30-year bonds today auctioned. The average yield on the new bond came in at 8%. That's better than had been expected. The 2 earlier auctions this week went poorly, some traders blaming new bidding rules for the higher rates, but investors may have just been shopping for a better return. Lower interest rates are lifting stock prices, even if they haven't helped the economy. The Dow Jones Industrials have soared almost 30% since the Gulf War. Over-the-counter stocks at a record high. Terry Keenan reports that some now, however, are saying the market is dangerously high.
Michael Backel is out of a job, but he's in the market for stocks.
You've been an active bond buyer for probably, I guess, 2-3 years now.
Until recently, most of his money was invested in bonds. But with short-term rates at 14-year lows, he's plunging back into the market.
My strategy definitely has changed. Looking to be a little more aggressive, get a little more growth. Try and make some money in the stock market as opposed to just relying on interest.
Backel's strategy is typical.
We've seen a tremendous surge and even speculative interest in what is a relatively early stage. It usually takes more time coming out of a recession for the market to go up.
In fact, most recovery-led bull markets are interrupted by a 10 to 15% pullback in prices. So far, that hasn't happened, leaving prices at levels well above those justified by corporate profits, about 21 times earnings. Investors are betting lower interest rates will translate into higher profits as companies pay less to borrow. But with companies not borrowing, it's difficult to see how this time lower rates will flow through to the bottom line. If there is a correction, most expect it will happen around the end of the year. And fourth quarter earnings disappointments could finally force the bulls into retreat. Terry Keenan, CNN Business News, New York.
Well, stocks are hot. Retail sales, however, are not. The nation's major retailers today reporting sluggish October sales. Analysts had been expecting, however, a decline. Even so, it's a bad omen for the Christmas shopping season. The only bright spot, deep discounters like Walmart did have better sales. Coming up next on Moneyline, Carl Icahn and TWA. Will his airline survive stiff competition and this sour economy? He'll tell us all about it next on Moneyline. Stay with us.
The difference between a suspension that enhances performance at high speeds and one that can isolate poor road conditions at low speeds is a fine line. Now Cadillac combines both into one with speed-sensitive suspension. It adjusts automatically for highway, for city streets, or for spirited performance roads. Speed-sensitive suspension. Another way substance is taking shape, Cadillac style.
These days, almost everyone is looking for ways to use information technology. But even the best technology doesn't work in isolation. Which is why instead of merely providing technological resources, Anderson Consulting can help you integrate all your resources.
You never know when you'll need to investigate rental car rates, when relatives come to town for weekend getaways, or when your car's in the shop and you don't want to get taken to the cleaners.
Let's say you're looking for a mid-size.
All right, you're looking for a mid-size. May I see something in a compact?
Or really stretch out in this roomy, comfortable Dodge Caravan. Just $39.95 a day with unlimited mileage. For reservations, call 1-800-800-4000.
TWA, the nation's seventh largest air carrier, is in the process of completing a prepackaged bankruptcy plan. Analysts estimate that the airline is carrying up to $3 billion of debt. It's been selling assets to raise cash and slashing fares, trying to attract customers. Earlier, I talked with TWA Chairman and Chief Executive Officer Carl Icahn. I asked him for his assessment of the airline industry in this difficult time.
Lou, I think it's very difficult. With a recessionary economy, the airline industry wasn't prepared for it. There's just too much capacity. I've been saying that for about 3 years.
Too much capacity. Transportation Secretary Samuel Skinner says that can be taken care of, that he'd be very comfortable with seeing only 5 or 6 airlines. TWA is the 7th right now. How do you feel about the Transportation Secretary saying something like that?
Well, I think we'll be the 5th or 6th to get right in. I hope we can get right in there and make it, and I think we will. I'm not saying that it is wrong to see 5 or 6. I mean, that is a free enterprise system, and that's what I think will probably happen. But I think it may not come out exactly as people think. I think there's going to be...
How so?
Well, I think that you're going to see changes in the whole structure of the airline industry. And it's too early to say exactly how. But, you know, it's the only industry in the world, in economic history, where bigness doesn't give you cost savings. Our costs per ASM are much lower than Delta's, United's, or Americans, because the bigness does not really help them. It doesn't create them. And the reason is, I believe, that number one, there's too much bureaucracy, too much fixed costs, and also that there's just too much capacity.
Are those issues that you're addressing in attempting to put together the bankruptcy, the prepackaged bankruptcy?
Yeah, well, we made a deal. We virtually made the deal with that creditor, so I think that's just going to go in and out very quickly, and that's going to work out very well. But more importantly, we have taken down our operating costs dramatically. And as I say, we are a very, very low-cost operator. And what I think the niche for TWA is, and what's exciting for TWA in the future, is to change the business of business travel, where we can go in and we can be very cost-effective for the business traveler and fly the business traveler very cheaply. Now, everybody keeps saying, oh, you know, we can't have fair wars in this industry, we can't have this and you can't have that. And, you know, that's the cry of companies that are not cost effective. But we think that it's ludicrous that a business traveler to go to New York to LA has to pay $1,400 round trip when a leisure traveler could do it for $200 or $250. I mean, it's crazy, and I think sooner or later there's going to be that revolt. We're just waiting for a chance, and we are doing that. We're going in and trying to save that business traveler.
Well, you've come out with these business coupons, incentives for business travelers. You did that, what, about 3 weeks ago?
Yes.
How has that worked?
It's worked very well. We've gotten a very, very good response to it. Now, it's not going to make the big three too worried because, you know, it's a $25 billion market. So you don't have to get very much of that market to come out very well. But being that said, there is a definite need and a niche for a company like a TWA that can say to the business traveler, we can take you much more cheaply, and you really don't have to sacrifice anything. You take, in St. Louis, you have all these planes coming in and out. You know, we have these 4 banks, and you only have to wait 15, 20 minutes because all the planes come in and take off. So we say to anybody across the country.
Carl Icahn talking about cutting the costs of air travel, talking about the likelihood that he'll be involving his airline in more airfare wars, new incentives, low-cost incentives for business travelers. I can imagine Robert Crandall, Stephen Wolf, and Ron Allen not liking what they're hearing. Are you saying that TWA is going to engage in that?
We're going to be, yes, we're going to be doing more and more in this area because it just makes sense financially. I mean, I'm not saying that I'm the great altruist and just saying...
I suspected there was a good business motive.
There's a motivation here, but it works. And as I say, if you're a traveler and you're in any city in the country almost, if you're willing to stop at St. Louis, and you don't even stop, you just maybe 15 minutes, we can cut your fare down by 60%. In a recession, there are a lot of business travelers that want to do that. And going transcon, it's the same thing. And now going to Europe too, from the interior. Today, we drop fares going to Europe from 60 cities to go to Europe as a business traveler, not having no restrictions, no having to wait over the weekends. We dropped them 50%.
You also dropped your gates at Heathrow. There are people saying right now, this industry, you either grow or you die. You said TWA is going to be one of the 5th or 6th. It's 7th now. How do you get to that 5th or 6th position?
Well, just dropping the gates at Heathrow, we felt we got such a good price for them and we needed the cash.
Right.
So, you know, we can live with that. But I do agree that you have to grow. We are thinking right now, and I think we're going to do it, of starting a hub at Kennedy during the day, where you can fly from Long Island to any of our 60 cities. Well, not to any of the 60, but you can fly to Long Island from Long Island. You know, there's a $5 million passenger nucleus in Long Island, and we're going to make planes available during the day out of Kennedy.
Creating effectively a Northeast hub, then.
That's right. You know, you don't have to go to LaGuardia. So New York would have another hub, but it's not going to be that big at the beginning. They'll be going to a number of cities at the beginning, but not tremendous. And we're going to be doing a few other things that are going to be, I think, revolutionary almost. We're going to be coming out next week with something that I think is superior to the frequent flyer. In addition to the frequent flyer mile program, we're going to be coming out for the business flyer with something superior to that. So we have a lot of ideas of the drawing board.
Can you tell us what that is?
Well, it's a concept. I don't want to go into it at this point, but it's we're going to just be doing things for the business flyer. We're going to offer them awards and a whole panoply of
new incentives to fly.
Yeah.
Lower cost incentives to fly, particularly, of course,
Yeah.
TWA.
Yeah.
But Carl, as you look at the industry, the recession, the constraints, the squeeze on the industry itself, you have an aging fleet. 80% of your aircraft over 10 years of age. You're talking about...
Well, wait, I want to cut in on that because if you take away our 727-100s, which we are basically going to phase out, our fleet really isn't that old on an average basis. And you know, it's the very thing that I was pillared for 3 years, saying there's too darn many planes, and I wouldn't pay the prices that, you know, all these airlines were paying for buying these planes, and that's what put a few of them under. The fact that they went in and leased planes, leased planes at these tremendous rates, we held off, and today, that's one of the reasons we're cost effective. We're leasing good planes, you know, planes that are 3, 4 years old, and you're leasing them at 50 to 60%, and maybe less than what you had to pay a year ago, and what our competitors are paying. And these are great planes. And you can lease these planes today and save us a tremendous amount of cost. And that gives us the opportunity to give the business flyer these great cost savings. That and the fact that we're not bloated with bureaucracy. We've really cut costs out at TWA. We had to. And I mean, I'm there 20 hours a day, literally working on cutting these costs and working on being able to do these things.
Carl, I wish we had more time.
Right.
We thank you for taking this time.
Thanks,
Carl
Lou.
Icahn, head of
Appreciate
TWA.
it. Thanks.
Moneyline will continue in just 1 minute. Stay with us.
It happens every morning in London, Paris, and Madrid, just as the city starts to stir. In Munich, Manchester, Zurich, and Brussels, just as the business day begins. In Glasgow, Stockholm, Frankfurt, and Milan, as the new day arrives, so do we. American Airlines, with more non-stops to more of Europe than any other airline. Over 200 flights a week to 11 European cities in 9 different countries. So fly the one airline with more non-stops to more of Europe than anyone. American Airlines. Something special to Europe.
It's happening. Some people are climbing out of their imports and getting into the 1992 Buick Regal sedan. Why? One simple, overwhelming consideration. Quality. Buick quality. It's something you might want to get into yourself. Regal from Buick. The new symbol for quality in America and beyond.
Right now, America's most popular brand of appliances is on sale at Sears Brand Central.
What are you doing?
Where this 21 cubic foot Kenmore top mount and 22 cubic foot Kenmore side by side are at their lowest prices ever.
On CNN tomorrow, is the U.S. government doing enough to help find missing MIAs and POWs? On Cryer and Company. Then, actress Michelle Lee visits Sonia live. All tomorrow on CNN.
Some pleasant surprises sparking gains on Wall Street today. As I mentioned earlier, demand unexpectedly strong at today's Treasury auction, and sluggish but better than expected October sales made for something of a mini rally in retail stocks. The Dow today moving up 15.65. The Dow stands tonight at 3,054.11, the second gain in a row. Trading today, heavy on the big board, almost 207 million shares. Advancing issues beating out decliners by a margin of just about 5-3. The composite index up 1.84, and the composite index is 3/100ths of a point from its all-time record high. The S&P 500 also turning in a strong gain, up 3.75. The Dow Transportation's up 9.72. The Dow Utilities on an outlook for an improved interest rate environment, moving up 3.32. That's the biggest jump since back in August when the market rallied after the failure of the Soviet coup. The Nasdaq Composite Index hitting yet another record high, 545.28, up 5.80 today on volume of just over 216 million shares. The American Exchange Composite Index, 388.26, up 1.61 on volume of just over 15 million shares. Tonight's Moneyline movers, beginning with a few of those retail stocks. Dayton Hudson moving up 3 3/4, that after its jump in sales. Toys R Us moved up $2 a share, extending yesterday's gains on news of higher third-quarter sales. IBM up 3 1/4. Chairman John Akers issued a rosy outlook for the fourth quarter. Big Blue also extending its agreement to design chips with Intel, which moved up 1 1/4. We're going from computer chips to chocolate chips. Ben & Jerry's Homemade dropped 2 1/4. Fourth quarter earnings there expected to be below last year levels. Triton Energy moving up 7 1/4. Analysts say there is more enthusiasm about the size of its oil discovery in Colombia. Well, the stocks of Robert Maxwell's company today traded in London for the first time since his death. Maxwell Communication, the publisher's flagship company, dropped 39% of its price. The debt-laden company says it will sell its Berlitz language schools to raise about $500 million. But Mirror Group newspapers surged about 36%. That company is seen as more financially stable, obviously. And Solomon Brothers reportedly bought much of the stock. There is speculation that Maxwell's stake in it may be sold. Among widely held issues today, Sears moving up $1. A rise in sales last month reported. Bristol Myers Squibb losing 5/8, introducing a new cholesterol-lowering drug. Merck finished unchanged. The drug giant will cut its sales force over the next 5 years. International Paper dropped 1/2 after being pulled from analysts' recommended list. And Caterpillar adding 3/8, the company fighting back against striking workers by locking out about 1/3 of its employees. $61 billion. The Pentagon says that's the final cost for the Persian Gulf War. It's responding to a General Accounting Office report that said the United States may make a profit on the war because of excess contributions. The Pentagon says that's not the case. In fact, the Pentagon says the U.S. will have to tap a special taxpayer fund for another almost $3 billion. Coming up next on Moneyline, Japanese car makers pushing Made in America. We'll tell you all about it next here on Moneyline. Stay with us.
Chrysler Fifth Avenue at $22,000, the perfect balance between self-indulgence and common sense.
Now drive for the gold with $1,000 cash back on New Yorker Fifth Avenue.
Recently, Stouffer Hotels hosted the chairman of Dow Jones, held a meeting for the president of AT&T, planned a banquet for the CEO of Avis, and welcomed lots of other important presidents, too. In fact, maybe the reason we're one of America's top-rated luxury hotels is that our presidential suites are so often filled with presidents. Stouffer Hotels and Resorts. You can depend on our good name.
Business kept us on the road for days, and I was hard-pressed for a good deal on a rental car. But some guys in the airport might take me to the cleaners. Suddenly, everything fell into place.
Dollar Rent-A-Car is right on the airport, right on the money. Great rates, unlimited mileage.
May I see something in the compact?
Call 1-800-800-4000.
Lean to the left.
Lean to the right.
Great taste.
Less fat.
In every bite.
Introducing new Kibbles and Bits Lean. It's got all the great taste of Kibbles and Bits with a new slant. It's leaner. 30% leaner in fat than the leading dog food. So, lean to the left.
Lean to the right. Great taste, less fat. In every bite.
Tonight, the prolific Norman Mailer takes us into the inner workings of the CIA in his newest novel. Plus, Robert Stack returns as Elliot Ness. Tonight on Larry King Live, 9 Eastern on CNN.
Cars and auto parts make up 75% of the U.S. trade deficit with Japan. The Japanese car makers say they're trying to narrow that gap. Nissan today said it plans to buy $3 billion of U.S.-made auto parts in 1994. That would be up 40% from 92 projections. Nissan made the announcement at a dedication ceremony for its new $80 million research center in Detroit. Toyota is also trying to increase business with U.S. auto parts suppliers. Todd Benjamin has that story for us from Toyota City, Japan.
This is part of Toyota's in-crowd, suppliers from North America who are selling parts and components to the giant automotive maker.
They're very meticulous in all details, even some that we might have thought initially were not important.
The U.S. trade gap in auto parts with Japan is $10 billion, and a study indicates it could double by 1994. It's a big political issue in Washington. And critics charge part of the problem is that Japanese automakers rather deal with Japanese suppliers. But these non-Japanese suppliers say that's not the issue. The bottom line is having competitive pricing and the right product.
Well, you have to bring technology to the table. You have to have a good product when you're dealing with Toyota. Secondly, you have to be willing to work for a long-term partnership.
For many, that long-term partnership begins with Toyota's design and process. That is, involving the supplier in the early stages of the car's development, long before production actually begins. This is the second annual meeting Toyota has held for its North American suppliers, a visible sign it wants to further increase business with them. In its U.S. operations, Toyota is targeting 75% local content by next year. It's now more than 60%. In its production at home, its use of U.S. auto wares is up sharply from a few years ago, but overall, it is still tiny. In percentage terms, estimated to be less than 5%. The pressure for Toyota and other Japanese automakers to buy more from non-Japanese suppliers will continue. Pressure compounded by the poor state of the U.S. economy and next year's presidential election. Todd Benjamin, CNN Business News, Toyota City, Japan.
And another news break tonight in U.S.-Japan trade relations. Honda saying it will promote its Ohio-made cars in Japan. Currently, Honda sells about 1,200 U.S.-made Hondas a year in Japan. That's Moneyline for this Thursday evening. We thank you for joining us. I'm Lou Dobbs. Good night from New York. Crossfire coming up next. Here's Pat Buchanan to tell us all about it.
Tonight, we take up the Supreme Court case Lee versus Weissman, which, with Justice Clarence Thomas sitting, could overturn decades of law regarding the separation of church and state and allow voluntary prayer to be restored to America's public schools. That's next on Crossfire.